Alright, welcome back everyone to the seasonal wrap-up show. This time we're jumping into the summer 2023 season. We are just rolling right along with it. We got, 38 entries here. And we're going to try and do it in 5 episodes. We've got 5 little end cap shows at the end here. So it's probably gonna be like 6 or 7 other random entries per episode. So without further ado, let's jump right in, get our random number generator ready. So we have 33 random shows. So we're gonna plug that in right here and see what our first entry is. It is 17, which is Fate, Strange Fake. Whispers of Dawn. I think this is like an OVA or an ONA. I think. I am unsure, but I am also about to find out. Oh, wow, what a way to start the summer seasonal wrap-up show with a new Fate prologue. I just watched all of that double-length episode, Fate, Strange Fake, Whispers of Dawn, I believe is the title of this one. I am intrigued. To be honest, I have been a little bit missing good Fate content lately. And what I mean by that is a lot of these Fate spin-offs that have been coming out lately I have not been a fan of. I did not finish. I got through barely anything of Grand Order. I got through barely any of El Malloy Files. Got through barely any of Fate Extra. I don't even know if I tried Fate Apocrypha or not. I think I did, but I don't remember. The last Fate thing that I completed was Heaven's Feel. And before that, the last Fate thing I completed was that really terrible Grand Order special. So, I've been missing some fun Fate content lately, and I am very intrigued by this first episode. I like that this is it's basically usurping the Holy Grail War from Japan and placing it in America, but it's like a fake war. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's about to turn into a real war because Saber wasn't supposed to be summoned, but then he got summoned right at the very end. By the way, I love that, they constant, for most of this for a good chunk of the first episode, I would say, you think that the protagonist is going to be this guy Flat, because he's just fits that mold, which I was a little concerned about at first because he initially came off very annoying, but once he got to America and accidentally summoned Jack the Ripper without even realizing it, he started to become more interesting. I am very curious where on the morality spectrum this guy's going to fall, because originally he seems like a real goody two-shoes kind of guy, and you see in Waver sees flashes of Iskander in him. So I'm interested in seeing where that character goes. But it waits until literally the last 30 seconds of this special in the post-credit scene where we see some kind of outside observer. Again, I am not a Fate lore expert, so when I see a bunch of these observer parties, it's just I have no clue what the fuck this is, so I'm just going to trust that the show's going to tell me eventually. It might not, because it's Fate, but it might. But this outside observer literally tells us that this is going to be the main character for us to follow for this story. And she seems spunky. I'm interested in where she's going. I'm also interested in the new servant batch that we got going. I really like this concept of like Jack the Ripper not having a tangible body per se because history doesn't know what he looked like. That's kind of cool. Very curious who Gilgamesh's rival is in this. I don't know Enkidu. I assume that's something very like relevant to Fate lore. I might look up who this is later just to see. I do think it's kind of cheating to just keep using Gilgamesh over and over again, but you know what? He's a fan favorite, and he's a fan favorite for a reason. He's really fun. He is just really fun. I'm honestly surprised that there are not more good Gilgamesh clones out there. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of Gilgamesh clones, period, in anime, but none of them really capture the flashiness mixed with the bravado, mixed with the entitlement, mixed with the pure, raw power and awe that he emits. Like there's something special about Gilgamesh, so I understand why they keep using him, and they managed to keep writing him pretty well. So good on them. I am very curious about what his chapter will be like in this. And visually, it looks pretty solid too. I'm a little skeptical of the character designs. Some of them don't look great, especially some of like the human characters. Like this Faldius guy, I don't like his design at all. It seems to have a tendency to melt pretty badly at times. But other than that, good shot comp, really good lighting, action's gonna be out of this world. That fucking Gilgamesh Enkidu fight was nuts right out of the gate. Just shit flying everywhere, but you could easily tell what was going on. These like flashes of imagery that you get throughout this. I don't know what this Spectre of Death Serpent is going to be like, but I'm very curious that it has Enkidu kind of spooked. Yeah, I'm excited to watch this full series, actually, which I believe comes out this year in 2024. I think it's in the spring season that it starts. So I'll get to that in like 9 months, probably. But yeah, good prologue. Okay, Fate, Strange Fake is complete. Or the prologue is complete, I should say. And let's put it right here, just above Tonikawa, in the number 21 spot with a decent 7. Solid start to what I hope will be a good Fate series. Okay, so how many more randoms we got? 32. So let's pull up the random number generator. Come on. Load the damn site. This is annoying. Okay. Let's try. Nope. That's not what I want. Okay. We'll just use Google this time, I guess. Weird that the site was not working. So let's do... What did I say? 32? Alright. Next one is 8. What is that? The Great Cleric. I have seen this manga / light novel or whatever at a bookstore. The bookstore I go to a ton. So let's see if it's let's see if the anime's good. Oh boy, it starts again. You know, I I'm at a loss for words, honestly, on how so uninterested I am in this show. The it's another isekai. It's first isekai of the season. Yay! One of these days I'll find another one that I actually like. When was the last isekai that I liked? Was it Handyman Saito? Was that the last one? So it wasn't that long ago. Uh, but this is not that. Um, like, Norm, there's this thing with isekai where a lot of isekai break like a very simple rule of not necessarily a rule, but more of a guideline of storytelling. And that rule is why? Why is this thing happening to this person? Now, like, I will say that this one definitely had the most unexpected, I guess, isekaiing. I was expecting Truck-kun to come around this time, but no. So like a criminal stole a gun from a policeman, and when the policeman tackled him, the gun went off and killed our main character. So that was wild. But the question I have to ask is, why this guy? It's like, well, why this guy? Like, even amongst salaryman isekais, this is bland. Like, Saga of Tanya the Evil. The guy was a complete shithead, and so he got murdered by someone who he fired. That time I got reincarnated as a slime. He was generally a good dude, and so he actively saved his kohai from being stabbed. Like, these aren't hard. Like, they don't have to be deep reasons. They don't have to be super intricate why this particular person. It makes it more fun when it has a reason, like Handyman Saito. His skills as a handyman were going completely unappreciated in our world, so when he got isekai'd, those skills immediately became very relevant. And another thing about Handyman Saito that made it a lot more tolerable is that it skipped the isekaiing. Like, it doesn't lead with that. You don't get 4 minutes of fucking nonsense that doesn't matter. Because, like, at this point in our collective consciousness, unless this is your first isekai, which I pray to God that it's not, because holy shit, they speedrun it, the isekaiing doesn't matter. It does not matter. You could skip it and just say, this person got isekai'd. Oh, actually, I think, no, sorry. I was thinking another thought. The last isekai that I really enjoyed was Majirevo, which fucking ruled. So, yeah. What was I talking about? I lost track. Anyway, yeah, you can skip. There, that's a good example. They skip the isekaiing because it doesn't matter. unless the events that lead up to the isekaiing are super relevant to the character or the story or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can skip it and just save me the hassle of watching mediocre script writing. What else pissed me? Oh, right. And then he gets reincarnated into this world, and immediately it's just like, okay, go build your D&D character, bye. And that's what he does. He builds his stats sheet, and that's when I got so fucking frustrated that I turned it off. Because it's just like, okay, we did the isekai thing, now you do the build your character thing, yay! I want to redact it. I cannot say the things that I want to do. Also, this show looks like fucking ass. Now, granted, I was not expecting postcard memories within the first 5 minutes of the show. That definitely caught me off guard. They're not great postcard memories, but at least those shots look better than the rest of the show, which looks like super mediocre garbage. Holy shit, first isekai of the season, and it's fucking awful. Let's move on. Alright, Great Cleric is off the list. 31 more shows. Our next random is 19. Oh, Sugar Apple Fairy Tale Core 2. Alrighty then. I liked the first half of this show a lot. How far up on the was it here? Where is it? It's down. It's a little low on the list now, but let's see if Core 2 brings it up a little bit more. Let's jump in. Alright, just finished up the second half of Sugar Apple Fairy Tale, or Part 2, I should say. I wasn't expecting to have a lot to say outside of it's more of the first part, but call me Boo Boo the Fool on this one, because I got some thoughts, and they're very... I want to lead by saying that my thoughts on this are very complex, way beyond what normal people think about when watching TV, especially when it's about a cute little sugar confection maker and her hot fairy bodyguard. Well beyond that are the things that I'm going to dive into deeply with this. Before we get to that, though, a few off-tangent notes. I think I mentioned this in the first part, but the soundtrack for this is really prominent and really good, which is why I was surprised that it was by someone I had never heard of before. At first I thought it was Michiru Oshima, who did Snow White with the red hair, but it's actually someone named Himeko Tsubakiyama. That's what her name is. She also did the soundtrack for Sabiku Ibisco, and I think there was one other thing she did that I knew, but I forgot what it was. Oh, and I haven't gotten to it yet, but she also did the soundtrack for Shy. So I will be interested in seeing where she goes with that. I have a new soundtrack composer to look forward to in anime. Aside from that, with the exception of the high-level shit that I'm about to get into, it was pretty much more of the first season. Anne Halford is a plucky little sugar artisan. I almost said arsonist. Not the same thing. Who uses her wits and her creative abilities to figure out the problems that she faces in her field of work. bringing smiles and joy to all the people around her. And we love her for that. She is a ball of sunshine and just adorable. The romantic tension between her and Shal is getting even tenser. He gives her a few pecks on the cheek at one point, and I was just like, the way it was framed and shot, and the colors and everything, I was just like, that's hot. It was very sensual. I was hoping for more of that this season, to be honest, but this season was crammed with a lot of stuff. I mentioned in the first part that this show really understands systems of power as opposed to powerful people really well. Like, it understands how institutional issues, whether it's the way that women are treated as opposed to men, or whether it's how fairies as a slave underclass are treated. It understands that the problems don't arise from a few bad apples. They arise from a mindset, from a system that is in place and needs to be dealt with. The first season mostly just introduced those concepts and didn't really pose any answers per se. Second season definitely posed an answer, or second half part definitely posed an answer. And it's in the form of Lafal. What's his Lafal? I'm just gonna call him Lafal. Lafal. I forget what the little middle word is. But who is basically Shal's older brother, sort of. They were born from the same sword, but Lafal came out about 100 years earlier, and they don't say it specifically, but it's implied that he was treated very poorly by humans before this point in the series, much like many other fairies have been. And so his response was, once Shal came out, was to basically just launch a campaign against the humans and take back the realm. Because apparently they were both born from the sword of the fairy king, and therefore Lafal believes that they are destined to free all of the fairies from the bondage of humans. And this is where we reach what is probably the biggest problem and also biggest strength of Sugar Apple Fairy Tale. It is addressing, for a TV show aimed at probably teenagers and 20-somethings, it is addressing a fairly high concept idea from a Japanese perspective. This is not from an American perspective. So on the one hand, it is tempting to say, well, you should just view it from the Japanese perspective, but that's kind of impossible. It's just not possible as an American for me to look at a show that is very blatantly about slavery as a system and not have some thoughts about it. The rough so like at first I was like, okay, we're getting into some. I mean, it's not a perfect parallel, and I definitely think this is not what they were going for explicitly, but Lafal has a bit of a. The best comparison I can draw is that he's kind of a Nat Turner character. He is a former slave who is going to free a bunch of other slaves by any means necessary. And God, I forget which episode it was. It was one of the early episodes of Behind the Bastards where I think it might have been the John Brown episode. I'm not sure. But at one point, Robert Evans, the host of Behind the Bastards, basically points out that Nat Turner, if you're... we're going to get a history lesson on American slavery in the middle of me talking about Sugar Apple Fairy Tale. Deal with it. Nat Turner was a slave who rebelled against his master and killed him. And he freed a bunch of other slaves, and they basically just went on a march, killing as many slave owners and really just as many white people as they could. And at one point, like, it's a very controversial topic because they basically killed everyone, like including children. And Robert Evans makes the point of, to these people, that kid is just a former slave or a future slave owner. He is going to grow up and whip people. He's going to grow up and rape black slaves. He's going to probably kill them at some point if they defy him. He's going to mutilate people. So it's hard to hold judgment over his actions in that state. So back to the cartoon about fairies. We have this Lafal character who is basically the humans have wronged us. I'm going to set things right by getting back at them. We are going to kill our oppressors. And see, this is where the distinctly American form of chattel slavery makes it difficult for me to watch other kinds of slavery, any kind of fiction about slavery, and not have the outright solution of kill the masters. Because, I mean, I'll just say, I think a slave has every right to kill their master if they are being mistreated. If they have had their humanity taken away from them, they have a right to take it back. That's not a stance I'm gonna budge on. Which I believe I did touch on to some degree in Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga actually makes a good analogy or comparison for this, because in Vinland Saga it kind of does land on the, yeah, he has a right to kill the people who have enslaved him, but that doesn't mean those people aren't going to retaliate, and those people have way more weapons and way more men. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. It really drills in how hopeless it is within that system, and why Thorfinn has to find Vinland to create a place with no war and no slavery and no bloodshed and so on and so forth. I keep getting distracted by tangents and stuff, but like back to Lafal. Eventually, it we reach a point in the story where it says like, oh, Lafal. So, in this world of Sugar Apple Fairy Tale, a fairy's wings are basically like its heart, and the way that fairies are enslaved is their masters rip one of their wings off and like keep it in like a little bag or something, and crushing the wing or like squeezing it basically is like wrapping your hand around a fairy's heart, and it causes them immense pain. So that's how that is physically how the system of slavery works in this world. And so eventually it's revealed that Lafal has actually been doing this to other fairies in order to keep them in line under him. And the justification for that is that he has been so horribly mistreated by humans that he just doesn't trust anyone, even other fairies. He doesn't trust them to follow his commands properly. And a lot of that might be because of his interactions with Shal. And there's two things about this that bug me. One, the fairy, it kind of infantilizes the fairies a little bit that he takes these wings from. Like, it takes like 3 attempts for someone to say, well, that's just more slavery but with extra steps, and they're just standing there going, duh. No, it's not. It's just, but it's our king. Right, but he took your wing. So that's slavery. No, it's not. I'm sure you could read that in a more nuanced way, but it was very... It made the fairies look that he took the wings from look really fucking dumb. So that was one of my problems with it. But my bigger problem is, by doing that, by making Lafal just another slave master, they kind of they kind of backtracked on how difficult this concept was going to be, because like if Lafal was just going to be a liberator fairy and was going to lead other fairies to help into battle to free more fairies, then it would be very difficult to argue that he was doing the wrong thing. But if you make him also a slave owner, and you make him have the same mentality as the humans who own slaves, then it's easy to make him a bad guy, and that feels like cheating to me. It feels like a cop-out. It feels like they took the easy... It feels like the original writer of this novel, of this light novel, I believe it's a light novel, I'm pretty sure, the original writer of this light novel came to this point where they're like, oh shit, this guy's kind of the good guy. I have to make him more of a bad guy. And it felt like it was done in a way that was cheaper and a little bit lazier than would have been satisfying. Because at that point it's like, well, I guess there is no moral quandary here. We gotta kill this guy because he is also enslaving fairies. So he is no better than the humans. He's no better than the white people. Yeah, so on the one hand, I applaud Sugar Apple Fairy Tale for even attempting to do this. Because no one else is attempting to do this except Vinland Saga. At least in anime, I should say. No one is attempting to have a conversation about societal institutions that are fucking everyone over at this level. No one else is trying to have this conversation outside of Vinland Saga. At least from what I... in my current brain. So I appreciate it for doing that. But it just doesn't quite nail it. It's a little off target. It simplifies the message a little bit in ways that it shouldn't. Oh, and I completely forgot to talk about Bridget. So, Bridget. That's the other minority class in this series, is women. Women are not treated... It's definitely worse in the first season, but it's still present in the second season, or the first part. It's still present in the second part, but not quite as much, where it's like, women are secondary to men in this world, especially in the realm of, like, sugar artisans. And so Bridget, the girl who stole Shal away from Anne at the end of the first part, it's revealed that kind of the reason she took him was because she is also oppressed within her own situation. She's basically being married off to the person who is going to become the head of her work, of her father's sugar workshop. And even though neither her nor her fiance really care that much about each other, her father forced her to give up the life of a sugar confectionery at a young age because he didn't want her as a woman to take over the business, because at first it was framed as like he is just part of the system. And it's like, we can't have women doing this. But it's eventually revealed that the implication is the reason he doesn't want her to take over is because the workshop is in bad shape. And so her being a woman is going to make it even harder for them to bounce back financially. And so, but in either case, he is taking away her agency. Because she is a woman and he is her father, so she is basically his property, kind of. And so, unfortunately, her character arc gets severely truncated because of all the past 15 minutes of what I just discussed. And eventually, like, the solution is, like, she just goes, yeah, fuck it. I'm not doing it. And, yes, that is the correct solution, but I would have liked more development on that part, on that end. I would have liked more time with Bridget. And we do get she is characterized pretty well for the time that she gets. But the journey from I am a hurt person who is hurting people to I'm just gonna do me, fuck it. It felt like we were missing some steps. I don't know what those steps were, but it felt like we were missing some steps. Or maybe it's because we spent so much time, the gap in between those things was so wide with all of the slavery thing that it just felt jagged when it was reintroduced and immediately resolved. So I would have liked more of that. So yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about this show. Hopefully I didn't scare too many of you away. uh, I guess I feel roughly the same about... Well, I feel the same as I do about the first season, but even more exaggerated in split in different directions. It really shot for it and didn't quite nail it. And I guess for as good as the show, like, if you want more, like, just, like, narrative thoughts or character thoughts or anything like that, go rewatch my section on the first part of Sugar Apple Fairy Tale from probably early or mid-winter. So just go back and watch those. But aside from that, man, I talked a lot about this show. Alright, Sugar Apple Fairy Tale Part 2 is complete. And we're actually going to combine it with Part 1 here, so we're going to get rid of that. And where did I say I was going to put... I'm going to put it right, move it up a few spots. And it's still at a decent 7. I would say Part 2 got close to being a strong 7. It's in the high decent 7, low strong 7 range. If it had nailed the specifics a little bit better, I would have liked it a lot more, but as it stands, it's a very complicated series. Okay, so we've got 30 randoms left, so let's see what we roll next. We're getting 10. Sweet Reincarnation. So I'm going to guess this is isekai plus food. Let's see if I'm right. You know what? I gotta say, Crushed by a Falling Sugar Sculpture is definitely the most unique way of isekaiing that I've seen so far, at least that I can recall. Sweet Reincarnation, I got about a third of the way into the first episode. It was just fine. It was totally average. Like, there's nothing particularly wrong with it except for, like, the thing that made me drop it. But otherwise, it's like the character designs are fine. The characters are super bland but not offensive. It's totally average. But the thing that made me drop it is, like, this is Sweet Reincarnation. This is a baker, I don't know how to say this word, patissier? I don't know how to say that word. Who gets reincarnated. A sweets creator gets reincarnated. And all the OP and the marketing and all of it is about, like, him becoming a baker and a confectionery. And then in the first episode, it just takes this diversion into the bandits are coming. How are we going to stave off the bandits? And I'm like, is that really the first thing you're going to have, like, your protagonist solve in this world? Like, he already did, like, he skipped over adding lime to the soil to make it better. He skipped over different snack foods or something that he thought would be good. Like, he just casually mentioned those things in passing. And we're jumping straight to the bandits are coming. And it's like, that's really your priorities here? You're not gonna, like, show your... Like, in this kind of show, the first thing that we should see our character do after isekaiing is baking things. You know? Like, show us how him figuring out how to do his job in a world with far less technology than it already has. And instead, the first shot we see of him, the first two shots we see of him after he gets isekai'd are him as a baby in his parents' arms, and then him sword fighting. So, clearly this show doesn't have as much interest in the premise as it thinks it does. So we're just going to move on. Alright, sweet Reincarnation is off the list. What do we have now? 29 left in the randoms. Let's see what we roll next. 13. Temple. That's a vague title. Let's figure out what it's about. Holy shit, that might be one of the craziest opening scenes I've seen in a while. For those who haven't seen Temple, don't bother, it sucks. But the opening scene is dad talking to his kid. He goes, you know, surely it's better to have, like, more friends than less friends, right? It's better to have more friends than just, like, one friend. So I thought, like, maybe that would work the same way for lovers. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And then Dad goes, which is why I'm leaving to go pursue all the women of the world. I'm like, Jesus, what the fuck? Oh, that was insane. Anyway, this show is fucking garbage. What stuck out to me the most is that the main character's voice actor sucks ass. It is a terrible voice choice, extremely grating, and just not pleasant. Animation is mid as fuck, super mediocre actually, and all of the girls except the lolly have the same body type. This is an ecchi harem series, by the way. Probably should have led with that. So there's not a lot, like when I was watching the OP and I was like, oh, that girl's kind of cute. Oh, that girl's kind of cute. Oh, that girl's kind of... Wait a minute. They all look the same except for the hairstyle and color. Yeah, this show sucks. Also, the main character's I really don't get these in harem series. I really don't get these. I don't need women. I shall be a pure of heart and just not pursue anyone sexually. I'm like, who gives a shit? And it's set in college too. Get your rocks off, man. What the fuck? Fuck this. What are you doing? Next. So apparently I was spot on about this voice actor. He's done, like, barely anything. Like, here's, like, his role for this season, for this year. Like, that was his only role in 2023. Then a little bit in 2022. And then he did, like, 8 Black Clover characters. For some reason. What a fucking wild, career, or not career, this guy's had so far. I don't mean to shit on this guy. Anyway, let's take Temple off the list. And we're going to do one more random since Sugar Apple took so long to record. Let's see what we get. 25. Oh, Fly Me to the Moon, High School Days. Okay. This is like a 4-episode arc of Fly Me to the Moon. Let's jump into it. Yep, that was pretty much more of the same from the previous season. Just finished all of Tonikawa High School Days, I think is the subtitle for this one. Not really sure why I decided to split them up on the watch list, but there are some interesting little things about this section in particular, I guess. The fact, like, this is the arc where NASA starts teaching at the high school and meets all of the new high school girls that become characters in the series, and I think that's probably the most standout part of this season in particular is that it injects a bunch of new characters, which I think, in hindsight, was definitely needed. We needed a lot more varied interactions. It couldn't just be Nasa and Tsukasa and then the bathhouse people. It needed a little bit more variety of character, and we're definitely getting that. The high school girls are very fun and very high school girl. I will say it was a little weird just how much this season points out, like, high school girls are cute. I'm like, yes, I watch anime. I'm aware. But so that was kind of weird, but whatever. And then this entry also introduces Kaguya, one of the other high school girls, who is apparently going to be another big portion of the plot part of this series, which I didn't realize. I had forgotten that they foreshadowed all that this early with Kaguya, that she is... I haven't gotten that far in the manga yet, but I am assuming that she is actually Kaguya, the girl, the bamboo girl who went to the moon. I believe that's how the tale goes, correct? I'm actually not super up to date on my, not up to date. I'm not super knowledgeable about Japanese folklore in particular, to be honest. And it's been a very long time since I saw the Takahata Kaguya movie. So, I believe she goes to the moon at the end. Yes. But anyway, I do think it's kind of hilarious now that we have two girls named Kaguya in two different rom-coms with piercing red eyes. Almost to the point of me wondering, is the red eyes part of the tale? I don't remember it being part of it. I just think that's kind of funny at this point that that's becoming a thing. If your character is named Kaguya, and you're basing it off the tale of Princess Kaguya, you gotta give them red eyes, apparently. I don't have a problem with that. Red eyes are cool. Yes, this is basically just more of Tonikawa, I guess, aside from all of that. It's pretty much the same standard of animation quality, although I will say the first episode of this entry was probably the best looking. In that it had like some really interesting character animation, like Kaname. Kaname has this one really cool shot with a broom, this really cool cut. And she also has a really fun bit in the last episode too. I was missing her a lot in season 2, and so this season, this high school days segment gave me more of her, which is great. She's always been one of my favorite characters in the series, so glad to get more of her. But, yeah, not really a whole lot to add about this particular entry. It's just more Tonikawa, I guess. Go watch my entry on it from the spring season if you want to know more. And now to the list. Alright, Tonikawa High School Days is done, and it's not really changing position on the list, so I'm just gonna scroll up to where it was and just kind of add that little subtitle in there. Still a decent 7, still a good show. Alright. That's enough randoms for this video, so let's jump into our end cap series. Mushoku Tensei Season 2. Man, I heard some things about this season. Let's jump into it. Oh my god. Where do I begin? Do I begin with episode 7? I kinda have to. No. We're gonna save episode 7 for the end. I'm gonna talk about everything first, and then we'll get to that. In any case, I'm trying to be calm. I am trying to be calm. Just finished up Season 2, Part 1 of Mushoku Tensei. What a fucking wild ride that is. In a lot of ways, very different from what's come before, and in a lot of other ways, it's very much the same. For starters, it still looks pretty much just as good. There's not as many huge action scenes, but the ones that it has are still pretty fantastic. Character designs are still really solid. The Sylphie redesign as Fitz, I'm all about that. Like, animation-wise, still a really goddamn good-looking show, with the exception of episode 0. Now, I posted this on Twitter, but if something is labeled episode 0, I'm gonna give it a pass on some animation issues. I shouldn't do that, but the industry has taught me that that is what I'm supposed to do. That I have been taught by so many anime at this point that anything labeled episode 0, or like anything with a number with an episode number lower than 1, the animation quality is not going to be at its heights. And boy, it was not in episode 0 of this. Guardian Fitz, I believe, is the title of that episode. Man, those CG crowds were not great. But aside from that, really great animation in the rest of the series, really strong uses of lighting, shot composition. When something is meant to be sexy, oh boy, it is sexy. My only complaints is the censorship. Like the scene where Rudy is attempting to fuck Sarah, and like a solid third of the screen is just all blacked out because she's very clearly just naked sitting right there. Man, them Blu-rays. And speaking of that, that's another thing. That's a thing about the story of Mushoku Tensei that I really appreciate to an extent. Is that, like, sex exists in this world at such a fucking low bar that most anime doesn't even attempt to clear. But, like, sex is a thing that people do in this show. People are sexually attracted to each other. People fuck. People talk about fucking. It's like a natural human thing to do that for some reason most anime don't do. And Mushoku Tensei, for better or worse, does talk about it. And a lot of times, it seems normal. A lot of times. Not all of the time. Because, like, season 1 had some weird implications to some of the sex stuff in it, which I was able to overlook because Rudy was being raised in a very male dominant family that had some very toxically masculine traits to it. Even though Rudy is still the reincarnation of a 30-something-year-old dude who was probably emotionally stunted at some point in his life. That's the thing that, one of the things about this season that, like, is starting to throw me off is, like, when Rudy was doing weird sex shit as, like, a reincarnated child, it was, like, it wasn't better, but it was easier for my brain to trick... It was easier for the show to trick my brain into thinking that it was not really creepy because I was looking at a kid doing it. And my brain wasn't fully recognizing that it's someone reincarnated into the body of a kid. Now that he's a teenager, like, that dissonance is starting to become more apparent. Especially because of some of the shit that he does. We'll get to it. But, again, on the other hand, I appreciate that they are talking about sex. There's a whole arc to this entire season of anime where Rudy has erectile dysfunction because of past sexual trauma, and he spends most of the season trying to cure it. Weird idea, but it's believable. And it actually, like, once that idea comes out, it is so funny but also relatable how people attempt to help him. Like this one of I forget what the princess's name is, but her bodyguard Luke, once he finds out that that's what Rudy's deal is, he's been like kind of hating on Rudy for the entire series, and once he found that out, he's like, "Oh no, I get it, man. That's rough. Listen, you're cool." And like Rudy's kind of guildmate, Zoldat, I think was his name, had kind of a similar reaction, took him to a fucking prostitute to try and have it cured. Which, implications of that are sketchy, too, because I believe he's... I don't know how old he is, actually, in this. I think he's only, like, 15. He could be older. They don't actually say it in the show, I don't think. Maybe... So, that's a little iffy there. The part where a 200-something-year-old elf who fucks men constantly starts dating clearly a teenager, that was not the most yikes thing in this show, but it's on the meter. It's on the meter. Mushoku Tensei has weird sex stuff in it. But the fact that it has sex stuff in it is also a positive. It's a mixed bag. Aside from that, I actually, like, with the exception of a certain grouping of episodes, one episode in particular, I actually really liked a lot of the characterization for this season. Like, I like that Rudy is having a sexual trauma experience. I don't like that it's happening, but I think it's interesting that it's happening. That is not something that I have seen not just in anime. I don't know if I'm sure it exists in live action media, but it's not something that I have personally come across. So, like that's a first for me as a media consumer. Granted, I don't watch a lot of live action stuff, but still, it's it's they're doing something interesting. I have to keep saying that to myself because we will get to it. I keep wanting to explode. And everyone who's seen this show knows why I want to explode. I'm saving it for the end. But, like, there's so many great, like, character moments in this series. There wasn't as much world building in this season as I would have liked, except for basically episode 9, which either that or episode, or like the last episode 12 might be my favorite episode of this season. It's not really a high bar in comparison to like previous seasons, because like, bar none, my favorite episode of this show so far is the penultimate episode of season 1 part 2, followed shortly by the final episode of season 1 part 2. Those two are still far and away the best episodes of this series, and there's some episodes in season 1 that are up there. So across the board, I would say that season 2 doesn't have quite as many peaks so far. But it does have some peaks. Like we got this big giant chunk of world building in episode 9, where we finally learn more about the reincarnation / teleportation thing. We're getting piecemeal bits of that, putting this mystery together as to what exactly happened, why that mass teleportation event happened. Other characters are really good in this. I actually do really like what they did with Sylphie in this, just the way that her character is built up throughout this, with some exceptions. The fact that she is just like, it's not a negative, but the fact that she is just full on horny for Rudy is... There's a scene in episode 11, I believe, where the princess asks her, what exactly do you want your relationship with Rudy to be? And then she goes on this wild sex fantasy tangent. And I was like, dear Lord, girl. Like, you do you, but dear Lord. But aside from that, I actually really like Sylphie in this season. The last 2 episodes are like super sappy and cliche, but they are the right kind of sappy and cliche for me to really like. It is so rote and by the books that I was waiting for a subversion that wasn't coming. And it just played it completely straight. And you know what? I kind of liked it. I really liked the last 2 episodes of this season. Which makes it all the more confusing or conflicting with what I have to say about some other episodes in this season. Before we get to the big one, I want to talk about episode 6 first, because as you might have noticed earlier in this video, I've had some interesting dabblings with how anime portrays slavery in the past. I don't know how it worked in video time. It was probably about a week. Actually, yeah, it's been about a week. These parts are going to come out about a week apart. And I would say it's been over the past 10, 11 days or so, I've seen 3 different anime portray slavery in 3 wildly different ways. In Vinland Saga, it was slavery is fucking awful and a blight upon civilization. It is one of the roots of all human suffering, and we need to do away with it. But the characters who recognize that do not have the power to do away with it, other than go settle a new place that doesn't have slavery. No war, no slavery. Vinland. And on top of that, we just see the absolute horror of what it's like to be trapped in a system of slavery and how it just completely breaks you. So that was Vinland Saga. In Sugar Apple Fairy Tale, we had a very valiant attempt at tackling slavery from an institutional standpoint that unfortunately did not go far enough, or rather, it went too far in certain areas and then tried to pull back at the end, but the gator was already pointed out under the bed. We saw the gator under the bed, and then they tried to cover up the gator at the end, and it's like, no, you already pointed out the gator. You can't. I'm looking at the gator under the bed. You can't tell me there's no gator under the bed anymore. To use nakey jakey logic. But ultimately, I think it was doing its best to tackle a subject that it was not fully prepared to handle. In episode 6 of Mushoku Tensei Season 2, Rudius and that prince guy are trying to figure out how to make figures. So they go buy a 6-year-old slave and start teaching her how to make figures. I have no words. And you know what? I really thought... I was... At that moment, I was in disbelief. I was like, we're really just playing this straight, huh? Like, if this was just a fantasy series, no isekai involved, I could overwrite that in my brain. I could be like, this is just part of the culture. They have not evolved past the point of slavery being bad. Rudius is from a post-slavery society, and he seems to have no qualms whatsoever with buying a slave and then basically using her as like a Dotaru type character. That's how the narrative uses her. She becomes a Dotaru type character that just kind of hangs around. And the sad part of that is he and this character, Juliet, when he is buying her, or sizing her up, I guess, before he buys her, we see they have this really intense, tender, emotional moment of relating to each other as people who were in the absolute pits of despair. And that's another thing. Sorry, I'm going to go off on another tangent. But actually, that's all I have to say about the slavery episode. It was not great. But that did remind me of like how interesting and how lopsided Rudy's character is this season. Because like on the one hand, there will be these very deep and dark and emotionally vulnerable moments of him just completely baring his soul to people. And like, you'll see him act in ways that seem very, very odd in like a stilted kind of way, and characters actually point out like his defense mechanism of like him trying to be a goody two-shoes, don't offend anybody kind of guy, because that's what has pushed people away from him in the past. And I like that weirdo space alien part of him. That part I'm fine with. But then there are other weirdo space alien things that he does, like the fucking panty shrine. I'm sorry, Mushoku Tensei, you cannot put that in there and make me take your show seriously. Like, you can't have that at this point. Like in the first or second episode, he burns the lock of Eris's hair that he'd been carrying around with him as a symbol of, like, moving on. Why didn't he burn the panties? That would have been... That would solve so many things. Or at least make him less of a fucking creepy weirdo. Because even by the weird sex pest standards of this world, that's fucking weird. And it every time, like the first 4 episodes, you see the panties like in every episode. And then they go away for a bit, and then you see them again in episode 7. And then you're reminded that they're there again in episode 8, I think. Motherfucker's got a whole damn shrine to his teacher's panties that he stole a decade ago. You cannot expect me to take that seriously. And you cannot expect me to like that. That's fucking weird. Almost as weird as episode 7. This is where I'm going to get angry. Because episode 7 is potentially the worst episode of anime I have ever seen in my entire life. And I checked Mel. I have seen almost 14,000 episodes of anime. So I hope that means something when I say it. If nothing else, it is the most morally repulsive thing I have seen in a solid decade, probably. I'm not going to explain to you what happens in episode 7, other than if you don't trust me when I say that it is the most morally repulsive thing that I've seen from anime, then I guess watch it. No, don't actually watch it. In fact, don't watch it. Do not sully your brain with knowledge of what happens in this episode. Because now I have to live with it. The things that happen in that episode that Rudius does to other people are psychopathic in one of the most fucked up ways that I could imagine. And the way that Sylphie responds when she finds out what he did is so goddamn bonkers, because Rudy does something really fucked up, and Sylphie's just like, well, okay then, I guess you did that. And then she helps further humiliate the people that Rudy does the fucked up thing to. I almost never wish to unsee anime episodes. Like, even the most dog shit, bottom barrel stuff that you have seen me talk about on this fucking thing. I don't wish to unsee them, because at least I learned something. from them? I learned nothing here. All I got was pain and the knowledge that this contaminates the entire series. Because every time I think from now on, oh, Rudy's like growing as a person. Rudy is actually not that bad of a character. I'm going to remember this episode and I'm going to start shouting at my TV. I'm going to start shouting into the void about how fucking horrible that episode is. The things that he does in that episode and then suffers zero consequences for. Because the people that he does that shit to in that episode, like, are just his henchmen afterwards, basically. And then, like, in episode 8, he basically fights a bunch of people, or they have him fight a bunch of people so that they don't have to get married off to some people, to someone. That was weird. Not as weird as this episode. Because I don't know what to think of this show anymore. I don't know what to do. Because we have this very nice meal. Some of the flavors are a bit off in some areas. Like, the way that Rudy completely ruins his relationship with Sarah by saying that dumb shit that he says. That wasn't great. Like, it didn't make sense in the moment. Like, I have said things when I was drunk or hungover that I didn't mean to say, but I at least understood the logic to what I was saying. Even after I was sober, I understood the logic to what I was saying. There is no logic to what he was saying in that moment. At least none that I could parse out. So, like, there are some flaws here and there that made me go, oh, I might have changed that. I might have done something a little different here. Maybe take out the maybe do the slavery thing a little bit different. Maybe make him, like, you know, hesitant to participate in slavery. None of that even matters because there is a giant smelly ass turd on top of this meal now that is episode 7. It destroys this show. The fact there is no way around it other than completely forgetting that it exists. And if you have to do that for an episode, it's not a good show. Or at least I don't think it is. But everything else around it, most of the other things around it, are actually really fucking good. And I hate that. I hate that there is this very, well, nicely cooked steak with like, sauteed mushrooms and onions, a nice red wine sauce, maybe a little blue cheese on it, all these things that I really like, and then just a giant fucking dog turd right on top of it. Because unless you cannot say, like, oh, that was a weird episode and move on, because if you remember that episode exists, it makes everyone involved in it look like a fucking psychopath. So, I don't know what to do. Other than, if I recommend this show to people, I have to tell them to skip this episode. Honestly, I would skip episodes 6 through 8. All 3 of them. And thankfully, there's not a lot of plot in those episodes. It's mostly like weird side story hijinks. But also there are moments in there where he grows closer to Sylphie. So I would hate to cut them all together. Episode 7 has to go, though. You cannot watch that episode and come out thinking that that was okay. I'm almost to the point where if I give this show a positive score, I will feel like a bad person. Because the episode is that, like, I knew that episode was coming. I had vague ideas of what happened in that episode because I saw it circulating on Twitter, and I was like, you know what? It's Twitter. Fine. People are going to exaggerate how bad something is. My expectations were low, but holy fuck. They did not exaggerate. In fact, I think they might have undersold it, actually. It is a contender for, like, the WOT, the worst of all time. It is, if not the very worst episode I've ever seen, it is top or bottom 5. It is bottom 5. And I don't know how to reconcile that with the rest of the show. Do I take it at that and say, this episode completely ruins everything and I cannot give it a positive score? Or do I just give myself amnesia? I don't know where to land because, listen, this anime is an adaptation of a light novel. A web novel, actually. It is an adaptation. This is not an anime original show. This is not something that the anime screenwriter came up with. This is not something the director came up with. It was something from the novels. And you know what? When you adapt a novel into a TV series or a movie, it's okay to rewrite things. It's okay to change some things. But because the anime industry is the way it is, because this is such a seminal isekai series that people have been waiting forever to get adapted, that put this team in a spot where if they made changes that big, people would fucking riot. And it would hurt sales. So from a financial standpoint, I understand why they didn't change it. But fuck you for not changing it. Where is your sense? Where is your brain at? That you thought this was okay. You could have completely rewritten how the two Beast Girls become Rudy's henchmen. You could have omitted that thing entirely. And you chose not to. They looked at this episode. They looked at this plot point and said, yeah, that's okay. Print and ship. I don't know what to say other than let's go to the list. Okay, I spent like 15 minutes trying to figure out what the fuck I score this thing as, and I'm just gonna take the coward's way out and split the difference I'm going to put it right in here in the number 29 spot, and you get a light 6. There was so much about that season that I really liked, ruined by that absolutely insane sociopathic bullshit. I might lower it even more later. I'm taking the coward's way out. That's just where it's gonna be for now, haunting me forever.